the plug-ins for the water. I think the other video got cut off. This is the tank fill for the pump when you're not connected up to city water. So you're going to put your hose in here and fill up the tank. You can hear the air coming out of this other little air tube, the breather vent. And when it's getting close, you'll hear it start to gurgle, so you'll know when you're getting actually pretty full. One down below here is the actual city water connection. And this hose does not spin, but the actual connector on the RV spins around to tighten up the hose onto the connector. The collar on the RV spins around. Hose stays stationary until it's snug. One thing to keep in mind when you're connected up to city water, once it's on, you're going to turn off the inside pump on the main panel. And the second thing to keep in mind is that you will never run out of water unless the city happens to run dry. And that means that it's possible, easily possible, to overflow your tanks. So keep that in mind. You will be dumping pretty regularly in order to prevent that from happening. And speaking of dumping, we're going to connect up our sewer hose. We might be a little bit too far away to actually connect it, but I'll go through the steps. And one thing to keep in mind with that is we want to keep all of our valves closed until we get enough water in there to dump. We don't want to leave the valves open and have all the stuff in the tank sort of slowly dripping out. It's going to get stuck in the bottom of the tank, and it will also get stuck in the hose, and we don't want that. So in order to prevent that from happening, we will allow especially the black tank and the kitchen gray tank to get some water in it and then flush it all out at one time, one big gush. And we do the black tank first, just like when we do at the RV dump. And again, if it's, you've only been a day or two, unless you're using the toilet an awful lot, make sure you add more water to it. You can use the shower inside to fill up the toilet to the brim, 2 or 3 times, and then turn it off, and then come out here and let her flush through the whole system. So we have the city water connected, so I'm going to turn off the freshwater pump. And that is that. Now when we turn on the sink or any of the water supplies, the water is going to come from the city water and not from our tank. You will no longer hear the of the pump pumping because it's coming from the pressurized city water. Again, keep in mind that your tanks will overflow or possibly overflow if you don't keep a close eye on them. So dump regularly. Okay, so also in this cabinet here on the driver's side at the back, we have a bunch of other stuff. One of those things that we use for RV park camping is, let me explain this. This thing here is the air pump hose for the tires. There is a pressure gauge on top of it. Pressures for the rear tires are 63 psi and pressures for the front 2 tires are 67 psi. We will cover that in a little bit more detail. You should not have to adjust the tire pressure unless something bad happens. And in here's another set. There's a set of jumper cables. And in this bucket here, we've got the sewer line support. So we're going to be using that. And also in this bucket, we've got that green lamp, the halogen work lamp. Not halogen, I guess it's LED, but super bright in case you need to do anything at nighttime if you get stranded or need some extra light outside. Also in here, this is our 50 amp to 30 amp adapter in case you come to a park where there is no 50 amp plugins, or no 30 amp plugins, you only have 50. You can use that. And this is the 30 amp to 15 amp. Again, in case some place does not have a 30 amp plug-in, you need to plug in. Those are in there along the back. And here is another air pressure gauge. So this little guy is a support for the sewer hose. It keeps a slope on the sewer hose so that the water continuously drains out. It's like an accordion. What you want to do is bring it over to the dump station, which is right here. Clear out some of the rocks from around there. And we'll leave that on there for now until we actually want to use it. They just typically unscrew. And then we're going to carry this thing back and feed it back, way back to where the sewer hose comes out of the RV. So as we mentioned before on the previous video about dumping, in here we've got the sewer hoses and everything we're going to need to connect up to the city water. We probably still want to use our gloves. Put a rock on them. Make sure it doesn't blow in the wind. There's not much wind here today. Put on my gloves. We're going to take the sewer hoses out. And we also want to bring out this piece on the end. So I'm going to put my gloves on and assemble these. So because we're quite a long ways away, we actually are going to connect these two sewer hoses end to end. So one end is going to go into the RV here, and the other end is going to have these two ends are going to come together, and this end is going to go to the fire end with this on it. And so I think we covered that before, so we're going to take the covers off. I just store the covers back inside here, so we always know where they are. So as we thought, the sewer hose is not long enough to reach all the way to the RV, so I've put it into this carrier and into the sewer, as you can see, and there is a slope that goes all the way along. Sometimes there's a rock or something you can put it on right here to keep this in here, but it's not that snug, so it's not, I mean, it's pretty snug, so it's not going to come out. And because the RV is a bit too far away, and we'll have to go out and do some errands later, when we come back, we'll be backing this up far enough to be able to connect up to the sewer hose. And I've left the cap on this end of the sewer hose so we don't have sewer gases escaping out of this end of the hose while we're not plugged in to the RV. And that is that for the sewer. Again, the one thing I want to reiterate here, we're going to be connecting to this, just like when we dump, and we're going to leave the black and we're going to leave the gray tanks closed until we're ready to dump. So after a day or two or three, or whenever the tanks are starting to get full, again, we're going to top up the black tank with fresh water, put some extra fresh water in there, and dump this first. So everything in the black tank comes rushing out and down the hose and into the sewer. And then once that's pretty much stopped, then we'll do the gray. And by the gray, I mean this gray and the gray in the back there. Okay. And then the last thing is the power. We covered that earlier. That's where the power plugs into the coach outside. These are the pedestals where they plug in. And this park has a 15 amp, a 30 amp, which we're plugged into, and a 50 amp. And sometimes they'll only have 15, sometimes they'll only have 50, sometimes only 30. But up on top, you've got the breakers. So before you unplug this cable, before you plug it in, you turn the 30 amp off. Turn the 20 amp here. Let's turn this one off now. And the 50 amp is a double breaker. It's also off. So the only one on is 30. And so before we actually drive off, we're going to turn off that breaker and disconnect the power. I've left the carrying handle for this rack here along with the hoses, or the hose ends, just so that it don't bounce out while we drive down the road. I'm going to do the errands we have to do. And that's it for park setup, I believe.